My game called Subject 021, a VR survival game inspired by Dead Space. I really want to try and make this as immersive sim as possible. So, the summary for my game is that you play as the main protagonist called Dennis. Dennis is a miner on the asteroid fields out in space, and dealing too much time with minerals, he became affected by these minerals and ended up in a wheelchair, essentially.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Well, just clarify, he's a pickaxe miner, not a child.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Anyway, after he gets in a wheelchair, he then applies for medical treatment on a space station called Arcades. And when he arrives on the station, Arcades, he's then held against his will and thrown into a cell, and then subjected to terrible and inhuman experiments.
That sounds fun.
Very fun.
Wouldn't want to be in.
So, the gameplay is very surreal. The player is placed in a constant, intense fight for their life. The player needs to scavenge for items, like food, medical like items, essentially, weapons. Yeah, exactly, like that kind of thing. Basically, I guess you could say it's a bit like Bioshock, like in terms of like scavenging. Like they constantly need that kind of like that scavenge to kind of, you know.
It's like ammo and stuff.
Yeah, exactly, that kind of thing. So, my target audience is 18 plus, sorry, due to the amount of drug use and gore and violence.
Oh, we love a bit of drug use.
Yeah, because you're going to be scavenging for a lot of things. You're going to be using like syringes and such to kind of inject into yourself.
Is Bioshock connected? Because they use like syringes and stuff.
I have no idea.
The first one was.
Is it?
Yeah, because
It was like 16.
it's got the horror, it's got the flashing images in it.
kids. I mean, let's not.
I was gonna say you harvest kids. There's splices running around the walls.
The platform that I'm releasing on right now is currently Steam. However, this might change to Epic because of their cut, or maybe even look at the potential to release my game on the Oculus Store. I believe that there is a market for my game, strictly because looking at the Dead Space community, there's definitely still a community there. Especially like fans of like Bioshock and such, there's definitely like an audience for it, especially for VR as well, that I've yet to come across a game quite like mine. So the unique mechanics.
Mine's just that good.
It's better than yours.
The unique mechanics in my game. So because it's a VR, I'm using the full body experience as much as I possibly can. So one of the main mechanics is the backpack that the player will essentially have. So the player can reach behind them and actually bring out a backpack, and they can actually sort through their inventory, through their medical uses, their weapons, and so on and so forth. So you can actually interact exactly what it is that you get. So if you go up to like a desk or something, you find something that you can scavenge, you can take your backpack from the back, and then you can just kind of just pop it in there. It's not one of those things where you just kind of joink it and it just really disappears. You're kind of just using that like full body experience. The same way with like healing as well. So when you take damage, you'll see like a chunk of your arm like cut open or something.
Jeez.
Yeah, like lots of blood and gore, and so you'll be able to use bandages, and you can kind of like heal yourself up. As again, going back to the whole notion of injecting yourself and so on and so forth. Another unique mechanic that I want to try go for is a lot of the gun building. So the gun building in my game is going to be very like complex. So when this player starts off, they'll encounter a rivet gun. And they'll be able to switch parts from it, so they can take the muzzle off, they can take the stock off, and they can switch it around to make it so the spread is like less, so it's more of just a straight shot rather than a spread, that kind of thing. So it like basically just that kind of thing, it's giving the player as much freedom as possible.
Is it like going for like the Dead Space 3 type of gun building type?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can kind of just mix them up basically. Yeah. The competition for my game is a game called A-Tech Cybernetic. It's very
What name's that?
Yeah, it's not very well known, but it's kind of similar in my game in a sense. But the difference is that it's all like it's a gun-ho game. You just go guns blazing down the corridors and you just kill like cyborg things. That's basically it. You follow a story, but other than that, it's just very like plain, and it's just very like just again gun-ho heavy. So mine is really focusing on like the deep mechanics of survival, again like gun building as well as world lore as well, and that's my competition. Okay. That's
you good?
That's all.
Really good questions.
I have a really big question as well. So you take inspiration from Dead Space.
Yeah.
So obviously there's talks and there's a few bits online about the Dead Space remaster.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know that like that game isn't just totally gonna like overpopulate your game? Your game's just gonna get lost in all the Steam kind of like releases.
Yeah. That's a fair question. What I haven't really thought of yet.
They're the best ones.
Yeah, but when it comes to like AAA games, one thing that I really try not to do is try and compare my game to AAA as much as possible. Mm-hmm. And because this is a VR game, the VR industry like side of things is completely different from like like first person shooters on Steam and such. So I do think that it would be affected, but I don't think it would be affected as affected as you think it will be. That kind of thing.
Just because it's VR.
Yeah, because it's in a different like platform in a sense.
It's like a mobile versus a PC game.
Yeah.
Or something.
So you know how you mentioned that your main character is in a wheelchair?
Yeah.
Is that going to affect, because it's VR, and from what you're describing, you're going to be able to see your whole body. Yes. Are you going to be in a chair?
Okay, so I forgot to actually mention this.
Okay, good.
But in the story narrative,
It looked quite a big part that you all went over.
when you are subjected to
That'd be so good in VR. Like having to actually flip the wheels.
when you're subjected to the experiments in the beginning, they attach these braces onto your legs and they weld them to your bones. And
So you're not an exosuit.
Yeah, essentially.
I have a wheelchair.
So yeah, it's a very small detail, but it's kind of.
I have a wheelchair look really epic, but like.
Yeah, the player will start off in one, so when they look down, they'll actually find out they're in a wheelchair.
So because if
for the whole game using a wheelchair, that would add a more unique mechanic to it, because that backpack system is used in a lot of games. There's a lot of games you can pull it off, and there's like a grid you can put stuff. There's tons of games like that.
I was literally just going to say the Saints and Sinners does that.
If you had your game be you're in a wheelchair, which means one, people who have motion sickness can sit down and not stand up.
Yeah, exactly.
It's more accessible. It's more accessible to people who
that's
have to sit down to play video games, which not a lot of VR games do. And you could have the movement mechanic be a whole thing. I think that'd be quite interesting.
I think that could be like an aesthetic, maybe like if you're very motion sickness and motion sick, you can like enable an option. So like you're not using as much like body movement in real life. You kind of just you can kind of just go for the game in VR.
I'm saying if you're going for a VR game whose style is to go in a wheelchair, I think that should be a thing that you stick to.
Yeah.
Because if you're in a wheelchair and then you're standing up again, that's just not the best representation of the world.
In the main game, you're not going to be in a wheelchair. You're going to be like walking about. But again, if they're very motion sick, then they could have like an option to actually kind of just sit down and not move as much in real life. Because there are people that have a lot of motion sickness.
No guesses who too. No guesses who too.
Just put a fan on, you'll be fine. Also, you mentioned you had like a deep weapon customization thing.
Yes.
What weapons are you going to have that you can get throughout the game? So you've got a rifle gun.
Yeah.
I assume you can have like a gun with bullets.
Yes. Yeah, you're going to have a very small security sidearm, a very small one, and you'll be able to actually kind of change the parts of this as well as there'll be there'll be different tiers of bullets with this. So there'll be like AP rounds, for example, that can like puncture through armor, like armor piercing rounds, as well as ones that are just like designed for the flesh penetration, that kind of thing.
So for that kind of things as well, you might want to have a look at Homefront: The Revolution, how they can turn like a pistol into like a mini machine gun and kind of like build up that thing. Do you know what I mean?
One good example to take note of is a game called Metro Exodus.
Yeah.
You can just turn like a little like small BB pistol into like a little tiny machine gun.
Yeah.
That kind of thing is what I'm aiming for.
Do you think that this type of game, because you said it's going to be like a single player, right? single player horror story game with a lot of gun customization and advanced mechanics with like wrapping things on your arm and injecting yourself. Do you think that'll be possible with this team?
I suppose
in the amount of time we have.
Looking at like the base mechanics that we really need, I don't think it would be as hard as per se, because if a character was to get hit with a certain item or something, whether it be like a machete or whatever, they would then get like a bleed effect, and then they would apply something. If they have bleeding, they apply a bandage, and then it would just cure bleeding, and that'll be it. If they don't cure bleeding, it will just constantly take health off every single second, that kind of thing. So like something like that is just like this. I feel like would be really simple and easy in terms of like the gun mechanics as well.
So that would be quite.
That seems quite like complex.
I think maybe not go like so wide with it, kind of narrow it down. So instead of it being multi-gun use, it's more just one gun, and we can like focus all our resources. So again, you could like just look into the rivet gun where we just code that instead of like having like a pistol.
That'd probably be better.
Yeah, so like you could just change like the barrel and such, so you wouldn't necessarily need a pistol because you have the option to customize that kind of gun.
Yeah,
as
I mean that's much better.
Yeah, so like just focus on the core mechanics. If they're too complex, we simplify them. But not simplify them to the point where they're completely useless. I really want to focus on the mechanics that really are really important to the player and that can really bring that give a lot of life to the game, essentially.
What mechanics would they be?
So if you think about the healing mechanic, I feel like the one where you wrap around the bandage around your arm to stop bleedings or such, or like just injecting yourself, I feel like that can give a player so much more immersion than a lot of other VR games, because they're not only focusing on the world around them in terms of being hit or like someone running at them, but they also need to be careful of their health as well, and they actually need to physically do something like wrap a bandage around them or inject themselves with something, that kind of thing. So
do you think they add something as a player? Right, because just imagine you play this game now, right?
You're in a wheelchair.
Right. But do you think the act of doing this, like rotating your arms around one arm, is going to be that much like more immersive than just going, I'm going to have a med pack? Do you think it's going to add that much to the actual game, or do you think it's just a bit gimmicky? I think it would kind of. I think it's both. I think the first time use, it'll be like, oh, this is really cool. Yeah. Then halfway through the game, it'll kind of become more of a chore. But I feel like the reason why it would be like that is because it's going to be frustrating. And one of the elements that I really want is there to be a really frustrating kind of feel to it. Because I want the player to kind of feel like, oh, I don't want to have to do this, but I have to do this in order to keep myself alive. Yeah. Because and then it'll keep them on edge. That kind of thing. Are you aware of any other games that kind of do that, kind of have that sense of urgency where they've got to heal themselves up, but they need to take the amount of time it takes to heal yourself? Do you know any other games that do that? I do not know.
I think Far Cry does it as well.
Far Cry, Saints and Sinners.
There's also VR. Yeah, Saints and Sinners, and
that's literally the best representation of it.
And there's the that VR battle royale game, what it's called.
Population War.
Yeah, that has. I think that has that.
I know what you're all going to do is just go to Fortnite.
Yes. We like Fortnite.
Because the Fortnite thing, depending on how much you're healing up, it's does all the sound effects and stuff. But the small ones take a short amount of time, the big ones take a longer amount of time. Yeah. But there's a bit where you're there because you feel the urgency of, I've got to heal myself up because this dude's going to come in with a shotgun or something. Yeah. But it's just a timer rather than a...
Sure.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about people with disabilities as well, the idea of doing that. Yeah, it was like shrink your market a little bit.
Yeah, you do more with things like a syringe, or because that's easier to do than this.
It's like the reason why.
Or you can just have bandages that you slap on your arm. If it's if you're going to show the whole arm, you can just actually slap them on where your arm are.
Because I thought about I don't want the player just to be instantly heal. They're just clicking a button.
It's more, I think for me, it would be more impactful for the player if they've got to wait an amount of time before they get healed rather than the actual act of... I don't think the actual act of doing this of putting my arm up because I'm doing something for the camera.
Yeah, doing this.
I mean, instead of having like bandages, considering it's like a sci-fi, it's in a space station, right?
Yeah.
So like you could have some kind of like gadget where it's like it shoots like a beam or something. You have to put it across and then it heals your arm.
Yeah.
That would make it like put it more in that futuristic.
Yeah, just something quick and simple.
If it's one of those like physical things, there's a lot of ways you can game it and glitch it. So if that's what you have to do, you can probably do this, and it'll probably mess it up so it constantly goes that.
Or have it like directly across.
Yeah.
There is.
Yeah.
The other thing I thought about when you were talking about your pictures, you seem to be putting a lot of like emphasis on this like building the gun system and stuff.
Yeah.
But you didn't really talk about the enemies or the things that you've faced against, because you're gonna the biggest mechanic of the game, from what you've said, is the building of the guns.
Yeah.
But what are you going to use the guns on? What's the need to have this customization and all these resources put into making the gun?
So a lot of the reason why you're going to be doing all this is because you're going to be fighting other patients that the station have kind of like lured in, that have like experimented on.
So you're going to be shooting other people who are in wheelchairs.
Who dropped the wheelchair? But you're going to be fighting those like other experimented patients. So a lot of them are going to have like extensive cybernetic implants. Some of them where like you can't shoot them in the head because like their head is like half metal. So you would use like an AP round. It's like to shoot through the head, etc. Or when you like find like a really like fleshy boy or something, you wouldn't use an AP round on him. You would just use like a normal round or something like that. And another idea that I had for the rivet gun was that if you like fired a round into an enemy's like foot, it would stop them and it would kind of just pin them to the floor for like a few seconds, and then they would like jolt through, that kind of thing. So it's getting really custom, getting really creative with the enemies. Like you can't shoot them in certain areas without certain bullets. You can't shoot them in certain areas in general at all. Some enemies are like a lot faster than others. So yeah, that kind of thing.
How would you really like emphasize the horror aspect of the game? I mean, besides the enemies that you've spoke about, just like would you have like an enemy which you literally can't really do anything against, like the alien from Isolation, or is it Mr. X or something from Resident Evil, where he just plows through everything and he's unstoppable, and like there's that fear of like, oh no, I can't go anywhere else, I've got to go. And you're just trying to like run away. Like, is there any kind of aspects like that, or like in Outlast where you're trying to hide in like a cupboard or something?
There is aspects of that, but it's not 100% that in a sense. So the environment is going to be very it's going to be very Dead Space themed. So it's going to have that kind of really dark and very dirty orange lighting kind of thing, with like very dimly lit lights and such. So that's one aspect of it. The enemy aspect of it is where you might be in a certain part of the station. So you might be in like a medical lab, or you might be just in a security, etc. On the other side of the station that you came from, there might be an enemy that respawned there that you may not even know of. So whenever it is that you travel throughout the station again, you might re-encounter him or re-encounter another enemy. One way you won't really expect it, because the corridors are so tight and so like claustrophobic, you turn a corner and you're not exactly know what's going to be there again after you've been from there, that kind of thing. So there's not going to really be an invincible level, because I kind of think that's going to be invincible, a character say, because I feel like that's going to be really cheesy and you're just going to be constantly running and it's going to be annoying. Like Mr. X has his advantages, but he has his disadvantages as well, just being annoying.
So I'm going to ask you another question. You talk about story, you talk about enemies, and you talk about all these systems being needed.
Yep.
But like, you seem to like not contradict yourself, but like mechanically, you're saying it's going to be story based, and there's going to be story based games tend to be like slower, more stealth based games. And you mentioned Alien Isolation, and it kind of sounds in one way you're saying you want it to go more like stealthy because they're going to be less enemies, but then they're going to be spread out, right? Yep. But then you're saying there's a need for this gun that I'm going to spend a lot of time making because there's going to be enemies. Yep. So like, it seems like you're kind of contradicting yourself with different systems.
One aspect I said at the beginning is I want to try and make it as immersive sim as much as possible. So you give the player the tools that they can do all this, but they don't necessarily have to do it. So the gun customization comes with its benefits, but also it's like
It's optional.
yeah, it's optional.
So my next
But
question
it's good and bad.
The next question is then, why waste the time making it if you're not going to use it?
If you don't use it, the encounters on level 2, level 3, level 4 may be harder, but there's always the aspect of you being able to kind of avoid combat by taking your time, taking it slow, and being able to kind of just stealth your way through it. There's always a chance. There's always an option to go gun-ho in a sense, but it comes with its disadvantages as well, because you have to encounter a lot of combat. If there's a lot of combat, you need powerful weapons. So for powerful weapons, you need to upgrade weapons that you have right now, which is why you would have that gun building.
So it's almost at the beginning, you almost make a choice of whether you want to be like more stealthy,
Yeah.
whether there'd be less enemies, or
Yeah.
like you just go gun-ho and there'd be more enemies.
I really want to do that kind of thing, but not tell the player, because I want to give the player the resources and like the ability to do these things, but not tell them. But they have to just discover it on their own. So if they find an enemy, they're not going to know if they can sneak around it or not until they actually try. They're not going to know if they shoot like an enemy in a limb with like a certain round, it actually does more damage than they think it is. Like I want the player to just kind of just experiment and do what they want, rather than me just telling them, hey, you can stealth or you can do this and that.
Yeah.
So I want to keep it as immersive sim-like as I possibly can, that kind of thing.
Okay.